Hi and welcome to another part of the JavaScript tutorials about DOM, and here in this part we're going to continue with the previous part where we learned how to get the elements of our HTML code with the class, with the ID, or with the tag itself. So here we're going to elaborate the examples and see exactly how they work. So I've added another p tag right over here, as you can see, and another line inside of my JavaScript code. Now I'm going to explain to that, but before that, let's add another p tag right over here with the class myClass. So I'm going to copy this and paste it right over here, but I'm going to change the line and change this to, this is another line for my class. And now let's save this. As you can see, it's been added. And as you can remember, instead of our previous tutorial, we had the item number 0. So in this part, I'm gonna change this to 1 and save this. As you can see, it changes to the second line. So it's gonna copy the second line instead of the ID, my ID p tag, right? So the inner HTML of this p tag will be copied from this p tag right over here. So we have two p tags with my class, and it has, the array has 2 items, so we're going to refer to the second item, which is number 1. So it's going to return this line. If I change this back to 0 and save this, you will see that hello world appears again. So now I'm going to do something else. As you can see, we have another p tag with no ID and no class. So here inside of my JavaScript code, I've added this line, console.log document get elements by tag name, and here I've got the third tag name. So I'm gonna console.log this one, and this is actually the fourth one, which is the item number 3, and it's gonna be this one. So if I'm gonna get the first p tag, it should be 0. So let me change this to 0 and run the code, save this. You will see that's hello world. If I change this to 3, you will be able to see that this is a p tag with no ID. So let me save this, and as you can see, this is a p tag with no ID. If I change this to 2, save this, it says that it's hello world because the third line is hello world. And if I change this to 1 and save this, you will see that this is another line from my class, and this is the second line, or the item number 1. Now let's continue our tutorial with this new example. So I'm gonna add another HTML tag over here. So I've written this code. This is a form, a login form, as you can see, and here I'm gonna save it with Control S. As you can see, it's a login form. So here, let me also add this heading for so for example, for it, I can say h2 login form, and so this is a login form, and it has a username and a password. So it has a default value for a username and a default value for a password, so it's changeable. But what we're going to focus right over here is to iterate through the values of the form. So I'm going to make you familiar with another function here inside of the JavaScript. So I'm going to add it right over here. We can also comment these 2 lines together because we don't need them. Now let's save this. And now right over here, first of all, I'm going to define a new variable, const for example a, and then I'm going to make it this equal to document dot forms. So here, because we're going to get the forms, we use the document dot forms, and here is going to focus on the form tag right over here. And then what I'm going to do here, so let's consider the ID for this form tag. So let me check. Okay, this is it. It has an ID called login. So let us find the login using this, and then here let's go to the next line. And what I'm gonna do is to define a variable called text, and it is empty for now. Now what I'm going to do is to iterate through the form. So here we have a form with the login ID, but it has so many elements, and each of the elements has their own values, right? So for example, Robert and the password, and then the submit value for each of them. So we're going to iterate through each one of them, and then we're going to add this to another element inside of our HTML document. So let me add another p tag right over here. So for example, where did I go? So the p tag, and what's going on here? So okay, I've got it. So the p tag, and then I'm going to use an ID for this ID, and then I'm going to call this demo. So now I'm going to iterate through the variable a, which has the form element of the HTML document, and then I'm going to write a for loop for let I equals to 0, and then we'll have a semicolon, and then I smaller than the a.length. So a has a length, and the length is, so we can check that it is, I think, 3, because we have username, password, and the submit, right? So now the next one is I++, so we're going to increment this, and then what we're going to do is to open a bracket. So instead of a bracket, we're going to add a value to the text, so plus equal to a dot elements so it's the ice element, so the for example, elements number 1 or 2 or 3. So we have the a, which is document.form, so it has elements, so we can write the elements right over here, and then iterate through the elements of the form. And now we can what we can do is to run the values. So we had the value inside each one of them, the value submit, value, the default values, right? So now we're gonna get the values, and then I'm going to also add a br tag in order to go to the next line. It's not necessary, but I'm going to do this because we're going to add some multiple lines. And by the way, this should be instead of the quotation mark because it's a string. And then that's it for the for loop. Now we're going, because we want to put this inside of the inner HTML of the p tag right over here, we're going to what we're going to do is to iterate through each one of them and put the values inside of the different, in separate lines of the text, and then add the text to the inner HTML of the p tag, so that in the different lines right over here we'll be able to see that the value of the username, the password, and the submit value. So here, instead of this line, I'm going to write document dot get elements by ID, get elements by ID, and then the ID is demo dot inner HTML, and it should be with the capital letters, and then we should write text, and that's it. Let's save this, and as you can see, we've got them printed out on the different lines instead of the p tag. So the p tag doesn't necessarily have to be one line because the text has 3 lines, and we have br tag in between. So we have them in 3 different lines. The default value of the username, if I add a value right over here, so for example, I can say Thomas and press enter. Okay, I need to submit this first, and okay, Thomas, and submit. And because here we haven't written any backend code, it will return to its default value, which is Robert. Doesn't really matter, but if you write that, it will change the default value to Thomas. So anyway, this is another way of getting the values from one of our elements instead of the HTML document, and then use it somewhere else or print it out somewhere else. And that is how we can iterate through one of our elements documents. So we have different kinds of the document dot, for example, one of our elements, not necessarily all of them, but for example, let me try that. For example, const b equals to document dot. So here, as you can see, we have, for example, body. We have so many different kinds of elements, images, and as you can see, there are a lot of them right over here. I'm not gonna work on each one of them, but there's a list of them inside the documentations of JavaScript. You can find them. But here we work with the forms. We have the body, we have the head, we have all the different kinds of the elements that we can use. Document dot name of the element, and then the name of the ID inside of the square brackets, and then we have it inside of the variable. So if it has different elements, we can iterate to each one of them and find a specific one of them or all of them altogether. So that's it for this part of the tutorial. Notice that some of these may not right now make any sense for you yet, but in the future tutorials where we're going to enter the projects, you'll see that how important it is in order to that we find the DOM elements, access them, manipulate them, and even create them or remove them. So in the next tutorials, we will also learn how to remove, add, or manipulate further instead of the DOM elements.